Welcome to Adult Education and Family Literacy Week and the Command Center, hosted by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. I want to welcome in Andrew Roberts. Andrew, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Thank you so much for having me today, Jeff.
No, thank you for all your work and the Barbara Bush Foundation, Family Literacy Foundation. We're super excited to have you on, and I think we need to start really with the basics because we want the world to know what the Barbara Bush Foundation and Family Literacy is all about. So, why don't you, if you can, just introduce yourself, tell us a little about the great work of Barbara Bush Foundation.
Happy to do so. Thank you so much. So my name is Andrew Roberts. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. The organization has been around since our founder was in the White House, and it was historically kind of focused on grant giving to literacy organizations around the country. But more recently, we had a pretty substantial shift in strategy. We kind of moved from Florida back up to the DC area, and we shifted from a grant giving organization to one that is actually operating programs and interventions across the country. We do provide some youth-based programs, but the core focus of our work is really in adult literacy. And so we feel like the Barbara Bush Foundation is in a pretty unique spot. We are really focused on being a catalyst for change in the adult literacy field. And this role really shows up most strongly in our work around the National Action Plan and our focus on technology investments that kind of started with the Adult Literacy X Prize and continues on to this day through our King Technology Innovation Fund.
Sorry, there you go. So we could probably spend a few hours talking about all the things you just laid out there. But let's start first with the action plan. So I had the privilege of serving on one of the committees that worked on some of the justice issues and impacted men and women going through our criminal justice systems and getting them smarter and skilled up. But what was the action plan? And tell us a little bit how that came to be.
Sure. So this work really stems from kind of as you just mentioned, a collaborative kind of planning work that the Barbara Bush Foundation kind of kicked off. I guess it was probably 3 years ago now. It really ultimately resulted in like kind of the National Action Plan for Adult Literacy, which we launched alongside the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, in October of 2021. It was intended to really take the thinking and the ideas of a very, as you know, a very broad and thoughtful field and try and distill it down to what can we do right now and what can we start to move the needle on if we're going to kind of solve this crisis that we find ourselves in. This work goes much beyond the Barbara Bush Foundation, as you pointed out. It involves a number of the big national players in adult education, all working together to kind of take bold new steps to bring about significant progress in adult literacy. And that's organizations like COABE, Pro Literacy, the American Libraries Association, World Education, and many more. We've kind of created this collaborative called All In, and we're really striving to make this, to make progress. The issue of adult literacy is way too big to tackle alone, right? And so it's going to take all of us, and that is why the work of All In is so important.
Yeah, so let's talk about All In. So I'm secretary of the board at COABE, so I'm really familiar with the All In project. But can you describe a little about what All In is all about?
Sure. It's really about bringing together all these different players in the adult literacy field under kind of a single umbrella to really make headway. I'm sure many of the people watching this are familiar with collective impacts initiatives in other fields. And ultimately, this comes to how can we kind of leverage this work more in concert, right? How can we leverage what each unique organization brings to the table and find ways to really tackle this this problem together? And so we're really looking at a number of ways to do that. There's a couple core areas that we're looking to address. Data is a big one. How do we kind of improve the data in the field? Most importantly, we want to make sure that we're keeping the adult learner at the center of this initiative. So how are we really meeting their needs as we're tackling these problems? We believe there's space for work in technology and data, as I mentioned. There's ways to kind of like professional development. How do we really come together around approaches for professional development that make sense? But ultimately, it's really about how do we bring all these different organizations together in a way that we can kind of amplify, almost like the sum of the whole was greater than the sum of the parts, right? And so how can we all get together to really tackle this in a cohesive way?
We're celebrating adult education and family literacy this week, and we're up in Washington. We're meeting with legislators, not only here on Capitol Hill, but throughout the country, and at all different levels, from a local level, state level, federal level. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the messaging that we should be delivering to legislators as we talk to them?
To me, unfortunately, I don't know if everyone understands kind of the situation the country finds itself in, right? The numbers surrounding, this topic of literacy are pretty staggering. And yet, the investment in adult literacy from the state and federal levels have not really kept pace with the overall need. So I would really want them to understand that education is fundamental to some of the core issues that we face as a nation, right? And that, things like the economy, social mobility, health, children's future success, and so much more. So I would really want them to understand that some of the things we talk about politically, there's literacy is a through line that kind of spans throughout them. And so, really, we need to figure out how we're going to invest and kind of address this crucial service.
I was so glad to see a piece that British Robinson put out recently, which really was able to quantify economically the impact of adult literacy, adult education, and I got to tell you, it's in my package that I often cite to of those great statistics that sometimes are they're the wow factor. When you get a legislator and you have them one on one and you give them some of those numbers and they go just wow, and that was one of them. And so thank you for and British for authoring that report and getting it out there. It is impactful because adult education, until you understand that the labor market demands that we face right now, they really start with the basic education, math and reading support, so that we can get people skilled up and get them into the jobs that are out there. And without that, that's where we really start facing the challenges, right? And that's where poverty lies right now.
Well, and that's the thing. I think we have to kind of, as a field, we have to make sure it's not literacy or education for literacy education's sake. I mean, yes, that's an important part of the work we do, but it connects to so many of these other topics, right? As you mentioned, the economy, workforce. What is the role of corporations in this? Well, everyone has this labor shortage, and yet so there's a solution here, right? If we can figure out how to get these people into the workforce and meet some of these needs. So 100%, I think the better job we can do connecting literacy to all these other topics that are going on, I think the more likely we are to really generate the funding and make some progress.
Yeah, for sure. So there are a lot of learners that are out there, some that are probably listening to this podcast and listening certainly to in the command center, what's going on this week. When it comes to messaging for learners that are out there, we know that persistence is a big challenge sometimes because life often gets in the way of adult education for our students, as well as some challenges for our instructors. And I love that you highlighted professional development as a key component of the work that you're looking to do, because it definitely, we need to support our teachers and we need to give them the resources and tools to really be successful in all of that. From a learner perspective, though, is there a message that Barbara Bush Foundation would like to share with the learners that are out there that are, making the struggle every day and making it happen?
I think anyone who's worked in this field knows how tough that struggle is for the learners, right? And, it is not easy. People have lives, they have jobs, they have kids. Trying to find the time to kind of do this work is not easy. So I think our first message is just, as you mentioned, persistence. Stick with it. It's a critically important task, and I think the payoff or the reward at the end is huge, right? And I think we as a field also have a role. How can we remove the friction from this process as much as possible, right? The work that our teachers are doing, it's not always glamorous, it's not always highly visible, but it's hugely impactful and I hope very rewarding. And so, at the Barbara Bush Foundation, yes, we want to try and raise the visibility. I think we want to try and raise the funding for this important field, but I also think we have to figure out how do we remove some of the friction to make this as easy as possible for the learners. That is why we're investing in things like technology, right? How can we bring their services to them so they can tackle it on their timeline, in a way that works with their life? Because everyone's life is different, everyone's needs are different, and so I think the best, the more we can do to make it easy for people, the better. And so that's what we're really striving to do. But I would just urge all the adult learners out there to really stick with it. It's a hard transition to take, right? And I think, but I do think the payoff and the reward is worth it at the end.
Yeah, we've been talking throughout the week about the Digital Equity Act and the fact that that's coming into play across the country over the next year. Really, programs are starting to think about how do we use some funding that's going to come down for that. And I was glad that it's part of part of the work that the foundation's done, they've really targeted digital literacy and digital equity as as one of the big platform things that they're going to try and tackle. And I'm curious, when it comes to the Digital Equity Act in particular, and making not only access and broadband access available, but also that education piece of digital education. Can you talk a little bit about the work and what the target is for the Barbara Bush Foundation on that?
Sure, no, happy to do so. So we have a couple pieces there. We are one of the early members of an initiative called N50, which is really about expanding kind of broadband access to areas around the country, or actually around the world that didn't need it. But we were one of the early investors in technology around our work called the X Prize, right? That we did, and there was a lot of learnings that came out of that. The biggest one, though, I think, is that how crucial digital literacy is to the success of these type of initiatives, and not just digital literacy for the learner, though that is important as well, but actually even digital literacy for the teachers and the programs that are executing this work, right? The learners gonna have struggles with some of these tools, and so we have to make sure we're arming the actual educators to handle those as well. All right, and that was a big learning that we came through X Prize. So we have invested pretty heavily in a digital literacy initiative. It's a resource guide. You can get it on our website. That's really focused around how do we kind of build digital literacy skills across the entire field, both at the educator side, and also provide really best practice tips for how to improve the digital literacy of the learners as well. And I will say, this also includes the developers of these solutions. A lot of times, digital tools are developed, they're so focused on the outcome and the learning that they kind of forget to build in that digital literacy piece up front. And that's just such a huge driver in the success of these tools. So I know our work in the King Technology Fund, we really work really hard to ensure that as we're working with these developers up front, we're really building this digital literacy piece into the design of the program right from the beginning.
I love it. So one of the things that really attracts me to the work that you do is in your name, and there are many programs and organizations out there that are doing great work when it comes to adult education and supporting it, and foundations and funding. But you have one word in there that every time I read it, I just say, I think they get it, and that's the word family. It's such an important part of the journey for an adult learner, and the impact is not only to that learner, but it's to the children and to the entire family unit when you talk about adult education and getting people smarter. And I was wondering, I know that was a priority for Barbara Bush herself, and she was always pushing education and the family, the piece of it. And I'm wondering what your perspective is, and how you see that family unit and what role it plays in all this.
Sure. No, it is still a backbone of our programming. To your point, this was kind of Barbara Bush's legacy here, and we continue to strive towards that. I think if there's one thing we learned we probably learned more than one thing, but one of the things we learned through the kind of more recent COVID and the impact on schools was the disparity that having a parent there to engage and help with some of the digital school offerings, how important that was to the outcomes that those students received, right? And that's just like another reminder of how important the family unit is if you're going to tackle this issue. So we continue to offer, while our more recent strategy is a little bit more aimed at adults, we continue to offer youth programming through our Read Squad and through our Book Explorers initiatives, which are mentoring programs executed through schools. And we're actually pleased to announce this week, in celebration of AEFL Week, we partnered with World Reader to launch a new product called the Read Life Bookshelf. It's a reading collection for both adults and children, and educators, by the way. It's fully online. It's available across all of our platforms. It's bilingual in English and Spanish. And it really includes digital books for adults and children, including titles that are suited to the reading levels and interests of adult learners, along with guided activities for families to take on, right? So you read the book together, and then there's activities that you can do together to really kind of take those learnings and make them concrete for the family. And wow. By the way, there are also complementary resources for instructors as well. So, it's all, again, please go to our website. It's all there, but it just shows like this is our newest offering, and it shows how we're kind of really trying to stay true to that family in our name.
That is awesome. So give it to us again. What's the website that people can go to get some of this information?
BarbaraBush.org. Thank you so much. I should have plugged that more holistically. BarbaraBush.org. There's a learning resources tab, and these things will be in the resources tab or in our news tab, and we will continue to push them out. It will link you to our kind of platform of learning for educators. We have a new learning platform that we have kind of just debuted, and so you can get there. The easiest way is through BarbaraBush.org.
I love it. I love it. BarbaraBush.org. So I'm going to give it to you. I have here in Washington, our command center, we have this magic wand that we've been giving people, and we're going to hand it over to you now. And the magic wand is you can kind of bring anything to light that you want. You can wish for anything to make it real when it comes to adult education and family literacy. What's the magic wand that Barbara Bush is waving, and what's the change they like to see?
Oh, that's a hard one.
There's so many. I know.
There's so many things I would like to do. Ultimately, I think, it's really around making this connection to the economy, social mobility, how important literacy is. And I think to that, it then becomes, how do you work with legislators? I know President Biden's already done a lot of work on here. How do we kind of like really make sure that the investment that the federal government and state governments are commensurate with the impact that this work has on families and communities, right? I think a lot of times we think about the work here that we all do as impacting the individual, and that is 100% true. But I think when you impact the individual, you're also impacting their family and then ultimately their community. And so really, I would wave the wand and kind of double the federal funding for adult basic education.
There you go. Now we're talking.
Right? Because I think there's so many great organizations around this country. We happen to be kind of a national organization in DC, but there's so many great organizations tackling this challenge, and almost all of them struggle with funding, right? And so this is where I would kind of wave the wand. How many people can we reach if funding was not an issue, and how are we really going to kind of bring down these staggering numbers?
Wow, that's great stuff. So I'm really excited. COABE is a partner in the All In project, and we're really excited about it. We enjoy working with you, with your staff, and we're looking forward to where this collaboration, because it really does take a village. And I think the days of anyone thinking that they're going to move the needle by themselves is just not going to happen. We got to bring everybody to the table and work together to make it a thing and make the world a better place and this change happen. So give it to us again, the Barbara Bush Foundation, to reach you guys, get more information about the projects that are going on and those resources. How can they get to you?
Please, barbarabush.org is probably the best way, or follow our social channels, which are all pretty easy to find. It's not quite ready yet, but we will also be launching a lot more information on the All In initiative, which is, again, this collective action initiative together. There's a little bit of information on our website currently. You can see the National Action Plan for Adult Literacy there. And we are working to kind of get new content specific to All In up soon. So more to come on that. We'll make sure that will be promoted heavily on our website, on our social channels when it launches. But you can at least get access to the National Action Plan on our website. I would just encourage anyone listening to this to give that a read. I think we tried, to your point, to be really inclusive in that process, and the content from that came from I think over 120 people over across the field, really kind of weighed in through these working groups. You stated it right. It's going to take a village, right? And every organization kind of has unique skills and capabilities to bear. It's going to take all of them if we're going to solve this challenge. So, please reach in and engage. We'd love the more participation, the better.
All right, so I'm going to give you a personal one. So here's the personal one. I did some work in one of the working groups, and we worked on the justice issues and reentry. We have a tremendous number of people, over 2 million people in our country that are incarcerated, but over 100 million people in our country have a criminal background. And we spend a lot of time, and we have a lot of adult learners that have been justice impacted. And we certainly hope that the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation will think about, making it a priority going forward. Correctional and reentry education is truly a big deal. And if we're going to stop our problems with mass incarceration and the revolving prison doors, then it really starts with education. And it is a family thing. It's a family event. Yep. So that's my personal plug. I had to put it in there because it is something that we want to make sure that that Barbara Bush Foundation really targets.
Well, 100%. You said it extremely eloquently. It's a major issue, right? And thinking about this from a practitioner standpoint, it's a very strong distribution channel for programming, right? Where we could get in there and make a real big difference for a large number of people. And, again, I talked earlier about the importance of a family and a community, what literacy has on a family and a community. There's no better example than someone kind of, getting out, not being reincarcerated. How are they integrating back? How are they able to find a job? How do we ensure they have the skill sets they need to do that? And so 100%, we at the Barbara Bush Foundation completely agree with you.
Love it. Love it. So if you're out there listening and you want to get some more information, go to barbarabush.org and check out the awesome resources. Keep your ears and eyes open for more about the All In project that's going forward. And COABE certainly is going to be right in the center of it. We're looking forward to that project. And thank you, Andrew, for being on today and for all that you guys do. Give a big shout out to British Robinson, the amazing work that she does. And keep those articles coming. We're looking at them, we're reading them, we're sharing them, and we want to keep it going. So thanks so much for joining us today.
No, thank you so much for having you. And as always, we're very thankful for, COABE's kind of support and of the All In initiative. But, you guys are a crucial part of this plan. So thank you so much.